Hello everyone, welcome to Crayfish webinar. Good morning to those of you who listen in the UK and also to those who are listening from Finland, Sweden and America. Also, good afternoon to those of you listening from China, and good day to those in the rest of the world. My name is Jiao Li, I'm the co-founder of Crayfish. I will be the host today for the webinar. For those who are new to Crayfish and our webinar, the presentation lasts about 40 minutes, and then we have 5 minutes question and answer session at the end of the webinar. Anytime through the webinar, you can send the questions through by clicking the question button on your control panel on the right-hand side during the presentation. Just quickly to introduce a little bit about Crayfish. Our company name is actually crayfish.io, which also platform. We are the first online marketplace in the world that's dedicated to providing Chinese business expertise on demand. We will tell you more about our platform and services at the end of this session. One question that I was asked a lot by our clients is, how do I convert the leads into clients in China, and how do I find the right distributors or partners in China? It seems like it's a common question no matter what industry you are in and what stage that your company is. So join us at today's webinar, focusing on tips for trading with China, converting opportunities into sales. Our speaker today is Ting Zhang, CEO and founder at Crayfish.io. Known as one of the leading China business experts in the UK, Ting has more than 20 years experience of UK-China international business, trade and investment. Ting first came to the UK to study in the University of Cambridge, and then in 2001, foreseeing the increasing trade between the UK and China, she left her career as a banker in the City of London to set up China Business Solution. And then the China Business Solution company became one of the most reputable China specialist consultancy in Europe. In her continuous pursuit for a more efficient and affordable way to facilitate international trade with China, Ting launched Crayfish in 2017, the first online platform dedicated to English-Chinese bilingual business services. Over to you, Ting.
Thank you, Jiao. Hello, everyone. So a little bit about Crayfish first. Crayfish is a full-service partner for doing business in China. We combine an innovative self-service online platform with tailored services. We can introduce that a bit later. But first, I would like to talk about how and where do you start to get your sales leads. As all of you would be interested to hear today is about how do you actually get sales. It's easy to get sales leads. You go to a fair in Berlin or especially in Shanghai, you get tons of business cards from Chinese companies who said they would like to cooperate. And then you come back and where do you start? And then sometimes people find you from internet search, more likely to be Baidu than Google from China. If you have particularly if you have some links that enables you to be visible on the Chinese search engine. And many of the times you may have got a contact from your existing partners in the UK or in, for example, Australia. They might point you to someone. Then finally, you might also hear from friends about companies that you may be able to work with. So these are all the sort of typical type of companies that you would start with. Then they really, you need to think about how you follow up those and what information, and then importantly also people, who would do the work, and what type of partner you want to help you converting those leads. But most important thing, do bear in mind that you won't just those business cards. Nothing would happen naturally. You actually have to make a lot of effort to make that happen. So we will talk through those major steps. So first, if you have some business cards and from the trade fair, or you have a referral, you need to follow up. So what is the best way to follow up? We typically in the West here would use email, and you would write a nice long email with a brochure and send it to the companies and contacts in China. That's all good. The first introduction, the first contact. And then, of course, you can also call them up, provided that the other end speaks English or you speak Chinese. But nowadays, most important, if you have not had that, is to use instant, more informal way to make contact. And that WeChat is the best one. If you have, that'd be great. If you don't, I suggest you download the app afterwards and start exploring it, because that will enable you to get access to decision makers very quickly at a very personal level. And we do have webinars covering digital marketing, and also particularly we will have a webinar on WeChat coming soon. So do tune into our events page to get a notice. But of course, nothing can be better than face-to-face contact and talk. So if you have sufficient interest from China, I would suggest you get onto the plane to go and visit those people. But of course, to go through some steps of preparation homework down first. I want to just quickly touch upon the communication side. We do have a communication webinar, which we did, I think, a couple of weeks ago. You can access that on our website events page. But in a nutshell, you need to keep your communication constant and multi-level. What does that mean? That just means that you need to engage stakeholders at different levels within an organization, especially if these are Chinese government or big companies, whether these are state-owned or multinational Chinese companies. So I'll give you an example. If you're education technology provider selling to China, you may wish to yourself as a CEO or MD maintain contact with the head of the education bureau in that city, and then your operational director or sales manager probably keep in touch with their deputy, and then if you have a techie person or a sort of project manager, then that person can talk to the operation level in the bureau who actually handles information such as pricing, training dates, so that first of all, for the Chinese side, the government particularly see you as a organization that has enough resources to actually commit to the business in China, but also free your time to be focusing on strategic side of things, relationship side of things, rather than detailed pricing, translation, etc. But one thing that's important is do not share confidential information, even with NDA. In China, due to the culture, people talk to each other. Doesn't matter, it's competitor or colleague. There's no real confidential information in China. If you tell one person, most likely other people will know this. I've seen so many happening. One of our clients gave a special discount to one customer. The second week, he got calls from all other customers to say, "You've given this, discount, and how about us?" But of course, also technical information. If it's your IP, it's the most important thing. Please do not share it rather than rely on NDA. You can share that step by step later when your confidence grows and when the interest is aligned with your Chinese customer. And then this is important. When you are selling to China, bear in mind most Chinese population don't read English or speak English, so you need to make your message clear in Chinese. And there's a number of things you need to be aware is you need to make sure if your translation is technical, you've got to make sure the person who does the translation actually knows the terms and has the knowledge. And that is most important. And if you are selling to mainland, don't get someone from Hong Kong or Taiwan to translate your message, because most likely it will be wrong characters. You can see the picture of Michael Jackson. He has two names. One is in Hong Kong, which is Michael Jackson, sounds very much like Michael Jackson in Cantonese. But in mainland, his name is Michael Jackson, which is the Cantonese pronunciation. So that is quite normal for a lot of translation in the film industry, music industry, creative industry, particularly names and places as well, and sometimes names of products. And if you are going to visit China to visit your customer, very important discussion, you do need to make sure you have someone you brief well in advance to make sure that the conversation, the important discussion are translated properly. Ideally, if you can afford, you should hire your own interpreter. And this can be done, for example, through our platform. You can reach those freelancing people that happen to be in your cities, free to, in terms of the time, free to support you. But also you can use your partners or your current, friends and agents in China to help you. And so if you're looking in China to sell your products, you have two approaches. One is you find a company, and that we would normally call them a distributor. So you need a company distributor when you are you are selling into sectors that have entry barriers where the existing sales network is important. And also if there are a lot of regulations and rules that made it quite bureaucratic. So do a proper search. By saying that, I meant don't just go with the people who approach you or your friend's recommendation. You need to make sure you have looked at all those people that potentially would be good for becoming a distributor. You need to actually have a long list and then short list and going through that selection. And also, if you like any of them to go to China and do your own due diligence, or you can also get someone in China on the ground to help you with those preliminary due diligence, or after you've seen them and before you make your final decision, get some basic information checked. And for example, you can check the shareholder information and the company track record, whether they have any legal case pending, whether they have any good reputation or bad, and also they're in China, where they're really, do they have a national network, as they say. Those information should be verified before you ink the agreement with them. Of course, if you have a Chinese speaker, it will help you find those information, because if you search on Google in English, you probably get the information compared if you can do the search in either Google or even better in the Chinese search engine. And if you're not sure, always ask for proof of evidence. If they say they've got this, ask them to prove. An alternative to using a company, a distributor, is you can hire a person. In a typical way, in the West, we would call them agent. So these are individuals who can go and sell on your behalf and take commission from you, rather than distributor, which typically buy off from you and sell and add the margin themselves. An agent would normally claim expenses, while distributor would look after their own margins, which covers the expenses. So that's the main difference. And in terms of hiring individuals, there's actually a good market now in China. This is an article, The Rise of the Freelancer, published on the China-Britain Business Focus magazine, which is freely available in many government offices, British consulates and embassies in China, but also here in some of the trade organizations. And this one talk about the rise of a gig economy in China, where there's a lot of younger generation educated and are very smart, but choose not to go to work for organization or any particular employer, but choose to have their own freelancing career, so they can manage doing interesting career they choose before they either decide to go for full time or decide to maybe take one of the interests forward. And this article also featured Crayfish.io, our online platform, where we have reached hundreds of freelancers in China who are qualified to do a lot of the work that's required to get into China. For example, translation, marketing, finding a distributor, finding a manufacturer, etc. So, and then not just SMEs find this useful to use in individual to save costs, but big companies provide that flexibility, access, which are not through full-time employment. So if you are selling to China, thinking to sell China, you might think, do I need to set up in China? Well, yes or no, depends on what stage you are. If you're just really thinking about selling to China, I would suggest you wait until at least you can see some very potential sales coming through, and then you can think about how do you do that? There's various options, as you can see here, starting from just a rep office where you can just hire someone to do some liaison and some marketing, to wholly owned subsidiary and joint ventures. And we would not be able to talk each of this in detail because each of them have a pros and cons and advantages and disadvantages, and depending on your objectives in China for your commercial operation, some of these are more suitable than others. We do have a webinar next Wednesday to discuss especially about setting up in China. So if you're interested in knowing more about this, then please go to our event page and sign up. And so on your journey to China to do business, don't just be focusing just business aspect. You do need to think about culture, because Chinese are very different from the Western in terms of how people think and behave and interact. And there's a lot of cultural element that once you know it's common sense, but if you don't, you might sometimes stumble into some problems. So, for example, if you keep pursuing a Chinese person for an answer and you don't get it, the answer is no. But they don't want to give you the answer no because it's seem to be making you or him or her lose face, and therefore ambiguity probably keep everyone as kind of in a state of friendship. So that's something you need to be open-minded, learn about culture. Again, we have webinars that cover culture aspect, and in the communication section last week, 2 weeks ago, we also talk about that. And then when selling to China, there is a common corruption sort of practice, which is a kickback. So, i.e., the procurement manager in some of the companies, whether Chinese or foreign, they would ask for kickbacks for purchasing your product, and you have legally in the Act, and you cannot do what the Romans do. That maybe sometimes your Chinese contacts or friends say, this is how business is done in China. You have to have cash under the table, things like that. Do not do that, because the Chinese government punish the foreign companies a lot more severely if the foreign company is caught. And you can see from the case of GSK, what they have done that time, what they did was very much a practice for everyone in China. However, GSK is a foreign company, is a big multinational company, and Chinese government expect it to lead by example, not to follow the bad practices. There's other things to consider. Importantly, if selling to China, you need to understand China is a highly bureaucratic country in terms of regulation. I think the British invented bureaucracy, but Chinese bureaucracy is a lot worse in terms of the details. And just give you one simple example. To set up a WeChat company account, here, if you set up a Facebook Chinese page, may hours to verify certain weeks because you quickest because you have to go through approval, including TROPS stamps from company, legal documents, all that sorts of things. This is because the low trust in the government from companies that that they believe that it needs to be read. It's different way of. So, for example, in medical sector, you definitely need the state issued licenses for medical sector, the equivalent of FDA. And in, for example, gaming, publishing, filming, then you need government. You need to have. It's very strict on the ISBN numbers, things like that. And in other industry and service, even if you are a law firm, you cannot operate in China without engaging a Chinese law firm, etc. So there's a lot of regulations. You got to be sure you know exactly what's happening for your sector. And if you're a technology company, most likely you'll be worried about IP, as rightly so. And we discussed early on about not sharing the important confidential information. However, when you start doing business in China, there will be undoubtedly risks to IP. So you need to balance that risk with building market share. I.e., you will probably have some risk, but importantly, you want to make money out of China. So that is something you need to be aware. We recently did a webinar on IP protection. So if you wanted to know more about it, you can access that recording on our events page, where we discuss about how to prevent IP violation. And then when there is IP violation, then how do you take that forward in terms of litigation, but also in terms of administrative measures. No matter how good your products are, and no matter how reasonable you believe your products are priced, when you go to China, there will be tougher pricing negotiation, unless your product is so unique in the whole world, there's no competitor, and the Chinese customer is so desperate to get a hold of your technology or product. In that case, maybe you will just be able to, sort of smooth sailing into your contract signing, but otherwise expect to have multiple pricing negotiation, and therefore you need to have your pricing strategy in place before you quote to the customers. Always leave room for some discount, and then special discount, then one-off discount, and all kinds of discount mechanism, so that you will make your customer happy without losing money from your own margin loss. And then after all this happened, sales made, don't expect your typical 30 days cash flow sort of payment received time frame. Because in China, if you sell into China first time, the customer would have to go through a whole process to clear the payment route to you. And particularly if you don't have, for example, a physical product, then it takes even longer, because the process would purely be based on contract, which the paper contract, because you would not have a custom sort of documentation to prove the product has passed the Chinese border. And the longest time could take 90 days or even slightly longer. So you need to think about that. And so don't be over optimistic in receiving the money too soon. In the meantime, again, the practice in China, particularly the bigger the companies, the worse they are, is if you don't chase your money, you won't get paid. So you need to have someone actually constantly monitor the payment side of things, and make sure that you do get paid in the time schedule agreed with them. Finally, don't just see your customer as just your customer, because now with the Chinese companies becoming more and more global oriented, a lot of them start to become investors in overseas countries. This is particularly the case with like the internet and IT side of things, with the big players like BAT, which is Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent, increasingly starting to invest in tech companies. And they start, sometimes they could be a distributor or a customer of a particular game or particular technology, and then they become an investor. So if that's something you think as your exit, then bear that in mind with your way to engage those companies. I would like to just illustrate some of the points I talked about through a case study. This is a case I worked previous in my consulting career. It's a company based in the north of England, developing massive car racing games. And because of the entry barrier in China for games, and this was a PC game, I download at the client side, terminal. So it's not an online app or mobile app. It's a massive game that has costed millions of pounds to develop. And therefore, going to China, the company wanted to find a qualified, suitable publisher / operator to help them push into China to get through the regulation hurdle, but also to be able to market the game in China in order for it to be taken off. The marketing budget needs to be in, 6 figures. And so when they came to me through their investor, which was a VC, a venture capital company I was advising to, at the time they were already talking to Tencent and a number of big Chinese gaming companies for actually over a year. But the conversation was on and off, and it did not lead to any solid sales sort of agreement. So I took the company on board, and within 6 months, we had a multi-million-dollar license agreement signed. So how did we do that, and what was the key factors that lead to that? Most important to start with is to look at who is the suitable partner. And although Tencent was probably arguably the biggest, it wasn't the best for this particular client, because the UK company's only got 20, and so all the discussions were with the CEO and the CTOs, and the highest could reach a big development. It's like if you are a tiny producer, you try to sell into Tesco, it would take you years to get through those criteria, but also it would cost so much money from the company in terms of its own resources to go through those. So what I have done is to find a company that still quite big in terms of UK size. They were listed in NASDAQ. They've got a few hundred people. But the CEO was still very much hands-on. He was an entrepreneur, so he loves to hear about big new games, and he's very engaging. And my contact was the CEO directly and the president, who then took on the UK company to engage directly. And also the Chinese company already got a product in tank and in airplane. Gaming. So for them, having car games, it's natural extension. While for Tencent, it would be like Tesco. You put one, bread among hundreds of brands there. While this one, they would be their only car games, and that was to start with. It was very attractive for both parties. And then the CEO from the UK side visited China 3 times over 6 months, and to meet the Chinese top, the management, to showcase the product. And then the final trip, I was there with them over 8 hours negotiation on term sheet and all signed. So that was just how committed you have to be if you wanted to succeed in China, particularly if you wanted to get a deal done in a relatively short time frame. Um, Doing business with China really requires to have a flexible and open-minded approach. In the UK and in general in a Western society or doing business, we value contract very much, and we say, okay, the contract says so, we should stick to it. But in China, it's a totally different interpretation about how contracts are seen. Contract, essentially, it's what both parties agreed at that particular time in the context of what both parties foresee. And if those situation changes, the Chinese company would think it's normal to request changes to those terms to accommodate, to suit the situation better. In this particular case, the term sheets were signed in China while we were there meeting the chairman, president, CEO, and then a month later, the chairman came over to the UK and did their due diligence on the UK client before they signed the legal agreement, before they actually paid the first payment, which was $1 million deposit. So again, we spent nearly 6 hours going through all the legals, and all that was done, and had a nice dinner and everything. So we all celebrate. And then the second day morning, I got a call, actually second afternoon, I got a call from the CEO. The CEO said, Ting, I'm just about to send an email. I want to ask you before I send this. I just got an email from the Chinese side, the lawyer who was here yesterday, to say they want to change the payment terms, which was agreed yesterday. They said that they're not going to pay $1 million now. They're only going to pay $500,000. Another $500,000 will have to wait till we send them a development plan, localization plan. He said, how can this happen? We already agreed yesterday. I'm going to stick to it and tell them the deal is off. I said, hold on, you cannot do that. Let's find out why they changed their mind. Leave it to me. I'll call them. I'll speak to them, and I'll report to you. So I called the lawyer and the president later, and I understood why. Basically, the president, the legal terms were shared with the China team overnight because of time differences, and the Chinese team, particularly the marketing team, the head of the marketing, actually CMO, said, this is not going to be best interest because we did similar term with American gaming company a few months ago. And guess what? After they received the first payment, they were so lazy. They just could not meet their deadline with any dragging them. So we cannot do that again with the UK company and having the same situation. So can you cut the payment by half, the deposit, and so that they were actually bothered to do the work in the time frame we want. So that is the worry, and the chairman, of course, understood that actually is very important. So he comes back to negotiate that. So now I understood this. I went back to the CEO to say, look, this is the worry, and I think it's quite reasonable what they worry because what happened to them with American gaming company. So you have two choices. Either you walk away with this multi-million-dollar licensing deal, or you go back and accommodate that, but maybe attach some terms of your own. So we discussed this, and what we come back to the Chinese side, we went back, the counter offer is, other than $500,000, could we get $750,000, so that there will be $250,000 left of the location plan. But in the meantime, could we, add also that the Chinese side, when they do localization, they can throw some favorable terms. I can't remember exactly what, but we managed to get something out of it as well. So that was all done, we're happy, and that deal went ahead. And then a week, I think actually because of the foreign exchange, problem I talked about. They had to wait for 90 days to get the 750,000, but that was done. On that note, I actually have to add in that if you are getting payment from China for a software licensing service, there will be tax implications, for example, withhold tax. It's quite actually high. So for this particular case, I think the deduction was about 16% from China. So you need to be aware of that. Again, we will have some more webinar coming up, talk about getting money out of China, and that probably in later, before the summer. So stay tuned on that. Finally, you can see on this slide, there's some pictures of whiskey and tea. So how did that play into this case? What happens is talk about gifts in the previous slide without elaborating. But when we went to China with the CEO and CTO, when I took them to meet the president the first time, I mentioned to them, you need to take a present, and I know the president of the Chinese company loves whiskey. So I said to our CEO, take some whiskey. Of course, we traveled separately to China, and then the night before the meeting, I met them at a hotel. So where's the whiskey? And the CEO said, oh my God, I totally forgot about it. I said, no, we got to get it because it will make him very happy. And so we had to go to Beijing and find a supermarket and bought a British whiskey and took off the Chinese label. And that's what happened the second day. And of course, after 8 hours negotiation, it was all done. And then we had that whiskey for pre-dinner drink, and it was all that start of the relationship that immediately brought the and the UK who are also, northern. So they seeing each other as brothers, the pat their shoulders. And then the tea pot is UK. So the office manager again calls on me to team. What do I need to be aware in his hospitality? I said, first, you make sure you book a nice restaurant lunch, a restaurant with some story. So they took the president to a restaurant where it's on a hill with beautiful view of the valley, and next to like Aston Martin's workshop, where we could visit the Aston Martin cars, where the Princess of Belgium, or I can't remember which country, was repairing her car. So it was very nice. And then let's make sure you've got some Chinese tea, not just coffee or English tea, because they're not used to having that all day long. Knowing the president is kind of Chinese president side is kind of quite Chinese. So that all went well. It shows that the UK side, the hosts care about them. That is a nice touch. So on that, stop the formal part of our presentation. You can think about the questions, which I will take, but then in the meantime, I'll quickly walk you through what Crayfish is. So I mentioned we have a platform we call Marketplace, where you can to get people, find someone in China to go to visit customer and write back, or do some due diligence or checking products. And then we will manager to help you finding those service provider, whether this can be Chinese agency or can be freelancing people work. So we manage those with for team members in China. And then we do have service to help you from strategy, concept stage to planning, management, and all of whether it's finding your distributor or hire staff in China or setting up or even finding working with people we vet and we trust. And whether it's admin, we service can help you. So do you have any requirement, and then you can look at our website, our event. But immediately next week, have a setup in China to go through all the details of the different strategies early on. Then you step up your mind the following week. So on that, I hand over.
So it's Q&A session. Just give me 1 sec. Let's see what are the questions. So the first question is, how do I find individual agent in China?
Oh, that is a good question. So you could do that through various ways. For example, if you have got access to a local university, there's a lot of Chinese students, and you could go to their career page and post a requirement for hiring someone. But bear in mind, university would want this to be a proper role, i.e. employed. So if you want this role to be just purely based on projects, so you should look at either your current contacts, if you have anyone, or you can use platforms such as Crayfish, our platform. You can post a requirement to say we would like to find an agent, and this is our pay. We're willing to share, say, whatever percent of the product with a minimum, maybe cost each month and cover travel. And sometimes you'll get more response, sometimes less, but most likely we'll have someone in China who happens to be available and interested in taking your product into China.
Okay. Next question. It's also related to sales agent or distributors. Should I find, because China is very big, should I find a distributor to cover all the regions, or should I go for different distributors for different regions?
That is, again, actually very interesting, because this is actually very important when you hire a distributor. Almost all Chinese distributors to start with would want to exclusive for national coverage. And that makes, of course, their life and your life easier in terms of only one contact and a coordinated approach into China. However, you must make sure that they do have the national coverage and they do have enough resources to do that for you, and that you're not planning to do any sales through yourself. But otherwise, you should consider regional distributor if the company is particularly strong in some regions. And of course, sometimes without other than region, you can also do by sector. If you have very distinctive sector, for example, if you're selling software into oil industry, but also into say manufacturing, then that too, you can have totally two different distributors. So it really depends on how you want to sell to reach your customers. But I would be cautious with giving any exclusivity. If you do have to give that, make sure it's attached to sales target and has a clause to terminate within a certain period if those targets are not reached.
Great. Due to the time limit, thank you very much for Ting for your presentation and your answers to the questions. The recording of this webinar will be on our website by the end of today. So you're more than welcome to go and visit and also have a look at the webinars that we are going to have in the following weeks. That's all for today. Thanks all for attending as well. We'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
哎呀，好了。